Our series. I know a couple of people are filtering in, but I think we will go ahead and get started for all that are here. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Alexandra Jarvis. I'm the Operations and Program Coordinator for the Global Youth Advancement Network at MSU. I'll be moderating the webinar today, which is the 4th edition of our Global Voices webinar series. The series is an opportunity for us to discuss the work that global innovators at MSU and all across the globe are doing in relation to the United Nations Development Goals. Today we'll be focusing on SDG 16, and I'll read what the goal is. It is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. I'm excited for the webinar today because it's a little bit unique from the previous 3 that we've done, in that we're going to look at this SDG through the lens of a specific project and context, which is the Grain Research and Innovation Project, which took place in Afghanistan. Another area where it's unique is from the previous episodes is that this one has a very personal element to the discussion, not only for the panelists, but also for the people listening. On the one hand, I think there's a lot of excitement around that, and it brings an important human interest perspective to the discussion. On the other hand, we're in the midst of a crisis in the region, and there's a very real humanitarian crisis going on. And there are people and faces behind all of the stories that are told. So with that said, we have done our best during our planning phase to make sure that this is a productive conversation for all participants. But I want to publicly remind you, Kurt, Lina, and Jessica, that you are encouraged to take a pass or a different direction on any question that you wish. That goes for anything that I may ask during our discussion, that you may ask of each other, or also in our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. For anybody, any of our participants, we encourage you to put questions that you might have for the panelists in the chat box or the Q&A function. And after our initial discussion, we will open it up to be able to ask the panelists some of those as well. So feel free at any point during the conversation to put those in, and we will ask those at the end of the session. With that background set, it's my pleasure to introduce our 3 panelists today. So we'll start with Jessica Garrels. She joined the GRAIN project at MSU in November 2018. As the Senior Program Manager, she provides overall project compliance and risk reduction support. She coordinates GRAIN's Graduate Scholars Program, which boasts 7 graduates to date and currently has 12 scholars in India and 15 between Afghanistan and Albania. It also provides technical guidance to GRAIN's Monitoring and Evaluation Unit. Prior to this project, Jessica worked with NGOs and USAID in several countries, and she earned her Master's of International Affairs at Columbia University. Next, we have Lina Mohammadi. She received a GRAIN Graduate Degree Scholarship in 2018 and graduated with a Master's of Science in Genetics and Plant Breeding in 2020 from Haryana Agricultural University in India. Her research work on both wheat and chickpeas has been published internationally. After graduating, she returned to Kabul and was hired as the Senior Agricultural Officer for the USAID-funded project called Advancing Higher Education for Afghanistan's Development, which was led by FHI 360. And after the Taliban takeover this past August, she was evacuated to safety in Albania, where she is waiting for the US to process her refugee application. And finally, we have Kurt Richter. He's an associate professor in the Department of Community Sustainability with 25 years of involvement in higher education and international development. Dr. Richter is also director and principal investigator for the Innovation Scholars Program and the GRAIN programs at MSU. And he is the deputy director for the Global Center for Food Systems Innovation. So welcome. Thank you, Kurt, Lina, and Jessica for joining us today. Like I said, I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I think we can go ahead and get started with some questions that we've prepared together. And the three of you are on the panel today because you were brought together by the Grain Research and Innovation Project, which started in Afghanistan in 2017. But before we jump into learning specifics about that project, I think it's important for us to have a little bit of background context on the region and why a project like GRAIN was necessary. So I'd like to start off with Lina and ask a question from, before the GRAIN project ever began. You grew up in Afghanistan, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about some of your passions and goals in life, and how did those impact your education journey?
Well, thank you so much, Alexandra, for the introduction. Well, I would like to start from my early education. I'm so fortunate to have had this experience, like option to go to college and get degree. Actually, I did not even start school until I was 11 years old, because the place where I live, the school for the girl was not available. So my father decided to move to Kabul. On that time, I was able to join school in very delay. So after I complete my bachelor degree, I participate in concours entrance exam and successfully entered to Kabul University. I have got my undergraduate degree from Agriculture Faculty of Kabul University with Agriculture, Economy, and Extension specialization. After I graduate from Kabul University, I have joined club project as a young professional consultant, and I have been working with them for almost 6 months. Then I have get chance to apply for another position in ICARDA, and likely I have selected as a extension officer. ICARDA International Organization was dealing with the research trial, which was implemented by ARIA, and also the project was try to engage women in agriculture through the different kitchen gardening program. But during that, I was dealing with the REI staff and also with the university scholar who had the internship with the area. During my work experience with ICARDA, I realized that wheat is very important crop and also a vital crop for Afghanistan. And I saw on the background that we don't have any single woman scientist in this field. So I decided to become a wheat breeder. And my goal was to bring change in agriculture system. But without an advanced degree, it was not possible. Finally, it was February 2018 that my dream was near to come true. When I heard about the GRAIN scholarship from my colleagues, I filled out the application, and luckily I have shortlisted for the interview. I was so excited because there were a huge competition and more than 400 people were shortlisted for the interview. The challenges which I faced during the interview, even though I respond 90% of the question, but the professor who was in the final forced me that it's not possible that I should change my specialization, because if I don't know the basic of plant breeding, so I will be not able to complete my degree program successfully. But I refused. He was saying, you will lose this opportunity because you are near to get this. But I was still on my decision that no, I will do my master's degree in genetics and plant breeding. Although it was tough, but I was thinking that it is only way by which I can make farmers self-sufficient and fill the gap of woman breeder in agriculture. After huge competition, finally, I got the award. The next challenges was which I faced when I selected as a grain scholar. The next challenge was my family and community. So it was difficult for my family to allow me alone to go abroad for a study, because I was the first girl in the community who decided to go abroad. But my family accepted all the gossips and all the problem of the community and allow me to go and pursue my degree, which was not easy for them, but they did. So finally, GRAIN project made possible to complete my MSc degree in genetics and plant breeding. And I complete the degree on time and return back to Kabul with lots of hope and plan that I will do this, I will do that, and I will finally bring change and improvement in my country, especially in agriculture system. But fortunately, everything destroyed in just 3 hours. Because without peace and security, nothing was possible. The moment that I realized that, yeah, Taliban it's take over of all the Kabul and the government is finished. Now Taliban is responsible for everything. So I would just feel that, oh my God, that time I fall down from sky onto ground, because I struggled too much until I became a breeder. So I lost everything, and everything just finished in 1 minute.
Thanks for that background, Lina. It's some high highs during that story with the scholarship and some really low lows. I think we'll get into some of that a little later on in the discussion. For the discussion now, you mentioned the GRAIN project, which is the scholarship you received. That's a big component of our conversation today. So Kurt, I'm wondering if you can set the stage for us a little bit to tell us a little bit about the GRAIN project, but also some of the background of the situation in Afghanistan prior to 2017 when the project began, and what made the project necessary.
Thanks, Alexander. Greetings, everybody. So the Sustainable Development Goal that we're discussing today, number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. People might think, why would an institution like MSU be working in something like that? And how do we address something like this? I want to frame this conversation around the idea that Sustainable Development Goal 16 is really about people. It is about individuals. It's about individuals having security enough to work, to enjoy their lives, justice, so the laws work, and institutions that actually do what they're supposed to do in a way that's equitable. In a country like Afghanistan in 2007, sorry, my dogs are barking, 1 second, close the door. In 2007, in Afghanistan, the situation was wheat is the primary crop for food consumption. Afghanistan has the highest per capita wheat consumption of any country in the world. And what the GRAIN project was designed to do was designed to help the Ministry of Agriculture and their Agricultural Research Institute to be better at selecting varieties of wheat that will produce more wheat in the different microclimates of Afghanistan. It was about putting more food on the table for the average Afghanistan citizens. Because in Afghanistan, every day you eat bread. It is the staple crop. Jessica, can you advance to the project objective slide, please? So our project objectives were to enhance the capacity of male to conduct wheat research, identify technologies and practices, that promises the greatest benefit to the wheat sector stakeholders in Afghanistan. This doesn't directly talk about people, but at the heart of the grain project was building the capacity of people like Lina to apply science around wheat research to allow the average Afghan citizen to have more food to eat. That is what we were doing. And in one of the strong areas of focus that Lina is a great example for was our strong focus on gender. We had a chief of party, Carmen Bice, and she had a wonderful mind and approach to how to include women in wheat research and try to get people like Lina directly involved in producing more science-based wheat innovation for the country. And so while we talk about wheat, our program is really about individuals and the organizations in which they work to do the work. And so we call this building human and institutional capacity development work. We build the capacity of humans and their organizations to work together to solve the problem. And in this case, around wheat and food security and hunger in Afghanistan. Back to you, Alexandra.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. I think that's an awesome background. And with Lina's information and your background on the grain project, I think we have a good foundation understanding for the discussion. Jessica, Kurt mentioned two things, that the project was about wheat, yes, but that it was also about human and institutional capacity building. Can you give us some examples of specific activities that accomplish both of those goals?
Yeah, definitely. Let me bring up this slide. This shows the multiple activities that were involved in the grain project. You can see that they are all aiming to get at, in different ways, capacity building and institutional strengthening. There's obviously not enough time to go into all of these, but I'll focus on two. One, the graduate degree scholarship program, which Lina has already mentioned, and then the other, the data management system for better managing data. But I'll go back a little bit first. The way we came up with these activities was first through an assessment that an external consultant did on the capacities and strength of institutions in the Ministry of Agriculture. And so it was from that assessment that two things really sort of rose to the forefront: staff capacity and also a need to better manage data. I'll take data management first and give you a little bit of background. Some people may know why data management is important to agriculture. Some people may need more of a concrete example. So basically, the consultant looked at the Ministry of Agriculture and the 6 or 7 research farms that were around the country. And what they found was that, these farms basically do field research. They look at agronomic practices, seed varieties to see what can increase yields. But you can't just take 1 year of data to just roll that then out across the country. You need a couple years of data to show that it can be replicated. And that's why data management is so important. The consultant in their report literally wrote about data management that it was excessively poor. They also mentioned that information is not standardized. It's not securely stored. People are putting information into Excel on virus-ridden laptops with no backup whatsoever. So clearly this was an issue, and we started talking with the ministry about that. We came to the idea of working together we did it for 3+ years on a tablet-based data management system. And this had a few advantages. Basically, the researchers would not have to take paper-based forms out to the field. They were able to, directly enter information, which helped reduce data entry errors. And they were also able to upload all that data instantaneously to a central database. So their supervisors at HQ and other researchers would be able to access that data whenever they needed to. It had the additional benefit, in particular, like Afghanistan, it's not easy to travel to some of these farther out research stations. There's not always funding to do it. So it also enabled the supervisors at HQ to take a look at the data output coming in and also help supervise their staff through that method. So over 2 years, we piloted the tablet and the data management system, basically worked out all of the kinks pretty much. And then we had a 6 to 8 month plan for handover and transition to the Ministry of Agriculture. Basically grain was taking a complete step back and it was fully in their capacity to manage. We had our last handover training in August of 2021, and then we planned to be there for about another year in case there are any questions. So it was a major step forward in terms of institutional capacity for the ministry to be able to actually use the data and use the research for results in the field. We all know what happened in August. And I think we'll have time to talk about that a little bit more. But to get to the other one really quickly, the consultants also looked at staff capacity in the Ministry of Agriculture, and they looked at 6 or 7 different departments like legumes, agronomy, seed propagation, and they found that among those 13 key staff that staffed those departments, 3 had less than a bachelor's, 7 had a bachelor's degree, 3 had a master's degree, and 0 had a PhD. So that kind of became an obvious sign for us as a project, and the ministry agreed, let's do something to develop the capacity of these folks. Let's start a graduate degree scholarship program. So really thanks to support from staff at MSU and connections that they already had with agricultural institutions in India, we were able to develop a scholarship program there. And our first cohort of students went in 2018. We had 7 master's students, 5 were men, 2 were women, one of whom was Lina. And we had 7 PhD scholars, all of those were men. Our second cohort went the year later, and it was 4 scholars, 3 were men, 1 was a woman. As Lina mentioned, it was, even despite our best efforts, it's difficult to convince single women or their families to go abroad to study. So that was definitely a challenge. In the interview application process, we also found that women just weren't typically performing as well in those application interviews. So rather than stop at just scholarships, we created an internship program and a big female mentorship program to work on some of those softer skills. But we also created a scholarship program at Kabul University. And we awarded 15 scholarships for that. 9 went to women and 6 went to men. So that was a really great step forward because we were able to get those advanced degrees within country as well. By September, we had 7 scholars that had returned with their masters, and the majority were working within the ministry. 11 were finishing their degrees in India, and 15 had finished 1 year of courses at Kabul University and had 1 year left. So that was a major step forward in terms of bringing new skills and capacities to the Ministry of Agriculture.
Thanks, Jessica. I love hearing about the multifaceted approach and all the layers. Again, you're not starting a project just to research wheat strains and see how many more bushels of wheat per acre can we get, but there's so much more that goes into it. Like you mentioned, the scholarships, the capacity building, the data management system that is going to help long beyond just an initial research project. Lina, we know from your introduction that you received a scholarship to GRAIN, and Jessica also mentioned it. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that scholarship, and how was graduate school important for your capacity building specifically?
Actually, in my part of expectation, actually GRAIN was a really sustainable development goal for Afghanistan agriculture development in different research parts like agronomy, pathology, and plant breeding. It was not only for me, we went in the group. For all of us, it was a new experience that study abroad. It was for men and also for the women, it was a new experience. And also, GRIN was planned that the scholar should study in different agriculture research field. And when they return back to Afghanistan, then they can cover all part of the research, because wheat crop and also other crop, they have different part, agronomical part, and also like physiology part, plant pathology, and everything. So the GRIN was managed like that we should have a scholar in different part. The only reason that I took my master's degree in this field and went to the HEU University was to bring improvement in agriculture research system of Afghanistan, especially in Agriculture Research Institute of Arya, which was built in 1959, but still it was need very high level of the capacity building, because the data system was not accurate, and also the data was not storing in the good way. When I start study in HU, on that time I saw that, yeah, the curriculum of the HU University is totally different from Kabul University. In Kabul University, when I was studying my undergraduate, there was not practical work. But in HU, we faced lots of problems because everything was new for me. I have started to take 9 deficiency courses, apart from the credit course and non-credit course. 9 deficiency course I was taking. Like, it means because I didn't have the basic from the in the plant breeding, so I was taking the classes which was organized for the UGs. So it was really good experience for me because I learned a lot. And the research which I selected for my master's degree, it had 2 both. One was on field research, and another the second both was on the lab work. So mostly the people who are doing MSc in India, the professor only allowed them to do only 1 year research. But GRIN project make it possible for me that I do research in 2 years, because my goal was that I should be expert in the wheat, and I should know both of the work. I should do molecular work as well as field work, morphological work. And I was able to complete my degree on time. And my goal was that when I returned to Kabul, I should establish a breeder seed company to produce quality seed and change the market system. By that, I can only make the Afghanistan people self-sufficient and also the farmers self-sufficient. Because we have water, we have land, the only things we don't have it is technology and also experience and good skills. So that's why I did 2-year research. And also, apart from that, GRIN project connects me with the young innovators of Agriculture Faculty of HU and familiarize me with the advanced technology. And also, I'm able now that what is the breeder right? What can a breeder do? But everything finished. When the Taliban come to Kabul, everything is finished. You know, I was thinking that still, I'm thinking that, yeah, in the future, maybe I can do something. Maybe if the situation change, I can do something. But I'm still thankful from my God and also GRIN and MSU team who made it possible that I'm still alive. At least I can think about my future. Maybe if the situation is come back normal, I will apply my plans. But now I'm still thinking about those women who had their master like me. They also struggle too much, but they are still in Afghanistan. I know that they will just breathe, but they are not alive. That's all.
Heartbreaking story there. I mentioned that, before when you're talking, I can't help but think about the highs and the lows. And I know that after you got back from earning your master's degree, that you had gotten a job and were really putting that the capacity building and all the knowledge you learned, the expertise that you have to use, and you didn't have a long time to be able to act in the capacity with the expertise that you had before the collapse happened this summer. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned something about 3 hours that came down. Can you just tell us quickly what were some of did you have a clue that crisis was emerging, or what was that situation like?
Oh, you mean, yeah, it was on August 15. In the morning, I decided that I should go and pursue my documentation. So I went to get my documents from the Ministry of Higher Education. I was given to complete the paperwork because I was returned from India. The further process of the degree should done by the Ministry of Higher Education. I reached to the office. It was almost 9 a.m. I asked from the officer that can you check for my document process? Is it completed or it's remain? He told me, okay, just wait on the line. I will check and let you know. I was waiting on the line. I received a call from my sister. She was so scared and said, please go back home. The people are saying that the Taliban is entering to Kabul. Oh, I shocked. I said, no, everything is normal here. Maybe somebody make joke with you. And suddenly she cut the phone. I was still waiting in the line. The officer received call. His boss was saying loudly that the Taliban are in the Kotisangi. It is near to the place which is near to the Ministry of Higher Education. And he was requesting to the people that please go out. I want to close the office. Everyone just starting running. I said, no. I ran toward the document keeping room. The officer tried to stop me, but I entered and I started searching my document. Finally, I found it. And he was, and the ministry worker was saying, you cannot take it because you have not registered it to the book. And the book was, the registration book was also not available. So it was the worst moment in my life because in that file, I had my passport, my all degrees, and also visas, like all the information, all of my degree, which I earned from long time, all of them was in that file. In that moment, I just start crying. By seeing that, the officer allowed me to take my document. When I get my documents, I just get out from that office and start running to the main gate of the Ministry of Higher Education. Oh my God! When I received to the road, I saw a crowd of people on the road. They were walking, and there were no taxi, no buses. Only I was seeing the people. And they are just, some of them running, some of them walking. I also walked up to 3 kilometers. I saw some boys and men was shouting on the girls. They were saying, oh, because you were not wear hijab, now see the Taliban came. Because you people work with the foreigner, so see, because of you people, everything is destroyed. I really afraid that time. Suddenly I saw the taxi was stopped in the corner. I went and I requested, uncle, please help me because I'm so afraid. People are shouting and please let me enter to the taxi. I will pay whatever you want, but please let me to enter. the taxi driver said, no, you should find someone else. I will not let you alone to sit in taxi, because if the Taliban say, they will say, what's your relationship that you give left to her. Finally, I found one other also, and I entered the taxi. It was almost 10 a.m. at morning. But I reached at home, it was almost 5 p.m. The way which normally take only 15 minutes, then that day, 8 hours I was in the way of coming to home.
That's harrowing, incredible to hear about how quickly the situation deteriorated. You know, you said normal morning, you ended up, you know, leaving the Ministry of Education essentially with the employees the last time that they left.
Yeah.
Kurt, I know that Lina is just one of several participants in the GRAIN program, and one of several women that were educated and serving in their with their expertise as a result of the GRAIN project. Can you tell us a little bit about the responsibility that you, and I say you, kind of MSU as an institution felt to intervene if possible to help all of the scholars, and were you able to accomplish anything?
Yeah. Our responsibility to them was, and I say myself, it's not myself, it's Jessica. It's parts of MSU that folks never see. But Jessica and I had some conversations about what we would do. And we decided that we would do everything humanly possible from MSU to get as many people out as possible. I don't want to say that I don't want this conversation to become about the evacuation, about what MSU did, but I do want to stress that I feel like we have a moral and ethical obligation to take care of people. And I feel like Jessica and I spent 2 weeks hardly sleeping, trying to get as many people out of the country. And we engaged with members of Congress, US State Department, Department of Defense, Michigan State University, to the highest levels possible. And everybody rallied around. And it took a monumental effort to get people through the gates, past the Taliban checkpoints, through the gates, onto planes to Albania. That's a story for a completely different day. But we take care of our own. And we did all we could to help as many of our own as possible. And we got several, but we did not get them all. And that's something that we will have to live with. It's an imperfect situation, but I will forever be proud of the work that Jessica did, that Representative Slotkin's office, that Representative Meyer's office, that Congress and Senator Peters' office, that the State Department did, that they all did to allow our people to safely get to Albania. Michigan State was one of only 2 or 3 institutions of higher education in the United States who got people out, and we got the most out. Forever, I will be, this is one of the most proudest things that I've done, and also one of the most heartbreaking things that we've done. So
thanks for sharing that, Kurt. And I think I want to mention about that. I think the importance of just briefly touching on those things is at this point in the kind of our narrative of this conversation, the GRAIN project has stopped to this point in our conversation. And the reason that it stopped, or you could say failed, although I don't know if you can say that considering the personal capacity building that went into individuals like Lina that will always be there. It had nothing to do with wheat research, and it had nothing to do with the Afghanistan's Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation and Livestock that you were working with, or really anything else related to the project. I think we're kind of illuminating how important SDG 16 is because it's about peace, justice, and strong institutions. There's so many institutions that aren't just wheat, or even if we talk about food security as a whole, as an institution, or education as an institution. All of these need to be strengthened, and peace needs to be present for those to thrive. Considering kind of the broader implications and thinking bigger picture of SDG 16, do any of you have any reflections about the importance of it and some themes or overarching implications?
Yeah, well, I'll take the first pass and then let others chime in. To me, institutions and the people that make those institutions work are the key to everything. I think number 16, SDG 16, is a real linchpin in making the other SDGs possible. If you really think about food security or clean water or any of the other important SDGs that we can, behind those is peace. If you don't have peace, you don't have the ability for people to do their work. If you don't have a justice system that allows rules to be enforced, you get corruption and you get societies that fall. And if you don't have institutions that work, then you don't have anything. And so to me, my students in my grad class on international development get tired of me talking about institutions, I'm sure. But in reality, I think how well system's institutions work and how well the people inside those institutions can do a good job to go a long way in determining the success of the other SDG goals. So what we have, what's happened in Afghanistan, and I'll briefly talk about this and I'll let others in the panel talk, is everybody who, all right, first off, all the institutions in Afghanistan were incredibly young. Most of them were just 20 years old. Even though ARIA was established in the 1950s, it wasn't functioning for many years when the Taliban was in control.
Kurt, real quick, can you remind us what ARIA is?
That's the Agricultural Research Institute inside the Ministry of, and in US terms, it would be like USDA's Economic Research Service or their plant biological, their research arm. So in Afghanistan, the institutions were really young. They were really super fragile. The reason the institutions worked to the level that they did was because of the individuals doing a good job. There wasn't a lot of trust yet between the institutions and the people. They were building that trust. Lina was one of the educated, was one of the people who helped make institutions work. And right now, she is in Albania. To make things worse, her peers, the educated peers who worked inside those institutions, the people she talked about inside the Ministry of Education, I would guess they are probably not at their desks today doing their jobs.
Yes.
They're probably in hiding, or
Yes.
they're sitting at their desk not doing anything. Very few countries in the history of the world have ever experienced the amount of institutional capacity, brain drain in such a high degree in such a short period of time. Everybody in Afghanistan who worked for a ministry, who worked for a system, either got on a plane or no longer going to work. So their institutional structures have been decimated. And that's where Afghanistan is at today.
Lina or Jessica, did either of you want to add anything to that?
I would just add, I think the idea that Kurt mentioned about trust in institutions, faith in institutions, you know, they were young. It was 20 years for a lot of it to be in process, which, you know, when we think about US support to Afghanistan for 20 years, it seems like a really long time. But in reality, that's not a long time for government and institutions to really strengthen and be trusted. But, you know, one of the things we knew and one of the reasons we were there is because institutions build trust by delivering on what they're supposed to do. That's why we were so focused on the Ministry of Agriculture, because we wanted to help them deliver that promise of greater yields, of better varieties, better agronomic practices. And we just didn't have enough time to do it. But at the same time, you know, if we think about stories that we've heard in the news, what are institutions supposed to do? How do you build trust? You pay salaries on time. You do deliver on results. You're not corrupt. And some of those things were all still very present in Afghanistan, even while we were trying to increase capacity and build institutional strength.
Yeah, trust in institutions. I don't think we can understate the importance of that.
Yeah.
Lina, to this point, we know the situation is very dire. There are far more challenges than solutions, and it would take a lifetime of PhDs to begin to solve some of the issues. But I still think that there's ideas out there. I know that you have some. So I'm wondering, can you give us, in your opinion, what are some of the things that need to be done generally moving forward? How can we start? What are going to be some foundational blocks to beginning to rebuild peace, security, and strong institutions in Afghanistan?
Yeah. So when these things like happen, first of all, I want to share I was busy with what plan. After I returned from India, I have delivered 2 webinars for the QA scholar and also for the ARIA staff, which had 2 main goals. First one was to introduce my research topic and also molecular breeding techniques, which was new and new technology in Afghanistan. And secondly, I was encouraging women that if they work hard, they can be a good scientist in the future. And also if they accept the challenges, through that, they will be able to support in 80% of the women who are busy in agriculture, but they are not allowed to talk with the scientists who are men, or they are not from their, they are not women. Meanwhile, as Jessica said, that getting good job in Afghanistan and also make the trust between the employee and organization was so difficult. But because grain was make me my capacity skilled better, so I was able to find job in very short time. And I start working with AHED, one of the biggest USAID project. And the main things which I was trying to do on that project was to change the university curriculum and make it more standardized for the other students, and also make it gender centralized for them. Apart from that, I was willing to make some website for the data analysis, because most of the university scholar and research scholar was venturing to data analysis and also data interpreting. So now, I had this planning. Like me, there's lots of other women and also boys who have complete their degree and they will come to country to do something for their people. So I think first of all, the United Nations and other countries who were involved in past 20 years to make better life being for the Afghans, and they made lots of effort. Like one of the example is grain. So this international community should put they make a result of like the more people become educated, and also they make the population knowledgeable. So they should put pressure on Taliban and also the new government that they should respect the human and women rights. And I'm still hopeful because I think the society has changed. They are not the same as they were in the past 20 years. Although we know that Taliban has not changed. In 2002, Afghans start having an independent life. Therefore, the new generation grow up in democracy environment. That means it will be very hard for the Taliban to control this society with their old ideology. Because the new generation know how to deal with the unfair situation. They know that they can use networking and also they can use social media. So these are the tools which the new generation have right now. Therefore, most of us wants that Taliban should accept our condition. And also we don't want to go back to the dark years. If the situation in Afghanistan like become normal, I'm damn sure that most of the people will return to the country, because all of them are not the economic migrant. All of them leave the country due to the security problem. And when the Afghanistan situation become normal, they can return back. We have lots of PhD, we have lots of MSc, so then easily they can rebuild and back become a strong institution in Afghanistan in different parts. So I request that United Nations and also the other humanitarian organizations that they should take decisions soon regarding the situation of Afghanistan. Otherwise, this extremely dire economic situation in Afghanistan, pushing families deeper into the poverty and forcing them to make the difficult choices, such as putting their children, their underage children on board, and also they will start underage marriages, and also they will sold their children and also their part of body to be alive. So this is my request that we should the United Nations and also all the humanitarian organizations should focus on Afghanistan situation and help these poor people.
Thank you, Lina, for that. One of the, I think, positive points in there that I want to pull out and reiterate that you mentioned, I heard you talking about since 2002, there's been a whole generation that has been raised in a fairly democratic environment. And I know that you've given examples to me also, but there are examples of young people especially that they're not going to be so quick to immediately. I think there's some people that feel like it's reverting to Taliban rule or oppressing women or any of the other atrocities that are happening, but there's a whole generation of people that you have mentioned and told stories about that are kind of protesting or fighting against that. And I think that's something that we can all take hope in. Just one or two more questions before we get to open it up for question and answer for all. Sticking with the theme of what's next, Kurt or Jessica, is there anything that higher education institutions in the US can do to help? maybe MSU in specific or in general?
Do you want to take that first or shall I? Okay, I've got a few things. There's definitely things we can do personally right now. I don't know if my screen shared full. There we go. You know, one thing we definitely need to do is thank people that have been involved and helped with this effort, and we're caring about the folks that were still in Afghanistan, worked really hard to get them out, are still working hard to get them out, to process visas and take care of them. So definitely thank yous to those in the Michigan delegation who decided this was an issue of importance and spent the months of August, September, and subsequent months working to help get Afghans who literally worked for US government or were sponsored by them in various capacities, just sending them thank yous because it, you know, it definitely reinforces that that is something that's important and that we appreciate those folks. We are going to be getting, I think it is 1,300 refugees, Afghan refugees settled into Michigan, and I think 300 are coming specifically to the Lansing area. We've got two great organizations right here next to the MSU campus that you could donate to or even volunteer your time with. And, you know, it's a season where we're all buying presents for people. So they've actually got wish lists on, they've got like Amazon wish lists and Walmart wish lists. So while you're clicking and hitting buy, you could also send something on over to them. That's the Refugee Development Center and also St. Vincent Catholic Charities. So the Refugee Development Center focuses more on skill building and adjusting to culture. St. Vincent Catholic Charities is really focusing on the resettlement. So some of the things that might be on that wish list, you know, towels, buckets, a mattress, basic stuff that people need as they're reintegrating here into the US. We've been exploring different things like what can MSU do? And something that we learned about recently was Every Campus a Refugee, which is a program that uses unused facilities at Michigan State or other universities. It started 6 years ago during the Syrian refugee crisis. And they basically put a couple of families in dorms for a short period of time until their more permanent placement could be found. They also have an aspect of curriculum, you know, internships for credit that relates to that. So you really get a more of a hands-on experience of what the refugee immigration situation is like. So that's something just to look into. Those are a couple of things I thought of. Kurt, did you have others?
Yeah, so Jessica and I are part of a nationwide conversation around higher education institutions, universities, about how we can support the Afghan refugees, you know, not only at the family level, but also for some of these highly skilled individuals who are, you know, highly competent like Lina, and help them get off to a quick start in the United States. There's conversations around, you know, scholarship program, English language programs. There's lots of conversations. Just to kind of put these numbers that Jessica talked about in perspective, Michigan, the Lansing area would get maybe 12 to 24 families a year, refugee resettlements in here in the past. That number is moving to 300. The refugee resettlement system in the United States is about ready to be put under extreme pressure. Anything you can do to support refugees via social organizations, your church, whatever, please take some time and do it, because the people who are coming over from Afghanistan, there's about 100 and some odd thousand Linas coming our way. The people that left Afghanistan and got on the evacuation flight, the 99% of them were middle class, educated, hardworking, kind individuals. You're looking at a photo of some of our refugees. You see Lina there in the back. All of those people in that photo, I would welcome to my community as a neighbor. They're wonderful people who's are only refugees because they work to improve the quality of life of their fellow Afghan citizens. And they helped institutions like Michigan State and other, organizations via funding from USAID, US military, and other things to try to make life better for others in Afghanistan. They're wonderful people. And I never thought I'd personally be involved in resettlement of refugees, period, let alone people that I worked with. And I just encourage you to understand, when you see something about Afghan refugees, picture Lina. She's what they are. She is the individual that is coming. And treat Lina, or the Linas coming your way, as you would want to be treated if you were in her shoes. Because if the situation was reversed, people like us would be the people that would be getting out and be in her situation. So just in this season of giving, be kind, and going forward, as you hear more stories about these refugees, don't think of them as refugees. Think of them as Linas, and then decide what you would do to help.
Thank you, Kurt. I think that is an awesome note for us to, we're not going to end yet, but wrap up our first section of questions. We do have a few minutes for question and answer from the audience. I think we've just heard some ways and suggestions that any individual can help, can be global citizens, and even some suggestions on a more institutional level like MSU. I am welcome anyone to put a question in the Q&A or chat box. We have about 10 minutes left before we will sign off. I see one already, so I'm going to go ahead and ask and open it up for any of you that would like to answer.
Can I add one thing before you ask the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
That we forgot to add to the slide, but we had talked about a job fair. As soon as folks come, a job fair would be something great too. I know we've got a lot of unfilled positions in MSU. People may need a little bit of help with their resumes and interviewing skills before they come to sort of adjust to an American style, though many of them may be accustomed to it because they've worked for NGOs. But yeah, a job fair seems like win-win, something easy to do, not a lot of cost, and could help fill positions.
Thanks for the reminder. Great suggestion. And I know that we have a lot of MSU colleagues on this call, and I think if we all have that on our radar, it's something that can definitely be done. So first question from the participants is, if possible, can you give us some background on hunger/food security in Afghanistan before and after August 2021?
Okay, I'll take the first crack at this, and I'm trying not to go into the exact numbers. I'm just going to talk about the situation. And say historically, Afghan has been what we call a net importer of wheat. They are unable to produce enough wheat to feed their own population. So they filled that gap with two forms of support from two sources. One is from humanitarian relief from donor organizations, which is the United Nations, US, other large groups via World Food Program and other donor organizations. Or they purchased wheat on the global market and imported it into Afghanistan. Now, today, the Taliban is in charge. The world has frozen all foreign currency movements by the government of Afghanistan. So Afghanistan as a government cannot buy wheat and import it into the country. Currently, there are humanitarian organizations preparing to deliver humanitarian aid into Afghanistan. The World Bank just released 250 million. Other people, they're planning on filling that up. However, as a country, their only source of wheat right now is what is produced locally. Very little of that wheat got outside of the family and into the national market to end up in places like Kabul to be ground into bread. The bakeries in Kabul, the big ones, the vast majority of their grain came off the international market. They are going to face a very long, hunger-filled winter.
I just Googled the numbers.
Yeah.
So it's more than half the population face
Yep.
acute food insecurity this winter, and that's 22.8 million people. We can share, some stories from some of our staff that are still in Afghanistan who have shared that like some families are actually selling their own household items just to have some income because people are not going to work. The Taliban's not able to pay government salaries. Banks are restricting, they may still be this week, but you can't withdraw more than $200 per week. We've personally on the grain project experienced troubles with this. Just to give you some insight, we're not allowed to pay, it's a USAID thing, we can't pay US dollars, salaries in US dollars for staff in Afghanistan. So until about a month ago, we were purchasing AFS, the local currency, and sending salary payments. Now, the currency is so scarce on the market, we can't purchase AFS and send salaries. So, we're one very small example of what is happening across the country and with all the different NGOs, government institutions, multilateral institutions that are facing the same problem. A lot of people worked for these types of organizations and were like not able to pay salaries. So it's really good that some of that money got released for World Health Organization, et cetera. But I don't want to say it's a drop in a bucket because it's really important, but there's so many other aspects that are going on and limiting the ability for families to take care of themselves.
And also like if it's continued the same as it is in past 4 months, probably in next 2-3 months, coming 2-3 months, like Afghanistan will face the same poverty which the African people already experience. So it is very tough for them. Like individually, I have contact with many of my friends. They are saying every day the story that people are like they are purchasing their children. Also, they are purchasing their pot of paddy, and also like most of them only buying the dry bread, and they are with the yogurt. They are spending their day with the dry bread. They will not buy fruits, they will not buy vegetable, and also they will some of them say like it is more than 4 months I haven't seen the meat. The Afghanistan people, they are always like to eat more meats, and also they are not like too much vegetable, but now they don't have this ability to buy the vegetable. So as the UN new report was saying that 50% of the Afghan population are near to become under the poverty line.
Thank you for that information. I think I don't see another question, but I think we have time for one more. If I see a question come up in the chat in the next few seconds, I'll give it just a few seconds for one more to come through. Oh, maybe we have one in the Q&A box. So Mohammed, do you mind putting some notes in the chat for us? I know you can't hear us, but you can hear me. If you can put some notes in the chat, that would be great.
I think one of the other things that's interesting in terms of institutions and what Kurt had mentioned is how important the people are. And, you know, he also kind of alluded to the fact that when institutions are young, the people are really critical aspects of that. And I think as governments persist and over time, it really becomes maybe less about the people. Obviously, you still need really good people, but the institutions become sort of what you trust regardless. You know, people will rotate in and out, but hopefully you have that faith built in the institutions that they're going to continue functioning, continue delivering what they promise. You know, that is what a state is anyway. Are you really a state if you can't deliver on your promises of security, on your promises of well-being? Without that, are you a state? And I think that's a question the Taliban's going to really have to struggle with, you know, moving forward. I think they are. What are they providing right now?
Right. And I think that there's, you know, it's the skills necessary to run a militia are very different than the skills necessary to run a government.
Sure.
And because of the Taliban's views and approach, the people with the skills necessary to run the government are either not at their desk or they're Lina, they're gone. It's going to take a very long time for the government to, you know, retool, restaff, because you have to have focused leadership on solving the problem. And if you don't view the institutions and, you know, the policies and the programs as important or not as important as other priorities, you're not going to have a government that functions well at meeting the needs of the people. So
I think that is a good comprehensive answer to that question about hunger and more. As the moderator, I promised that I would help us land our plane on time, which we have 2 minutes. So I just put Jan's email address in the chat for everybody to see. So if anybody would like to have follow-up conversation or has questions for any of the panelists, or even questions on things that you can do, I welcome you to send an email to janinfo@msu.edu, and my colleagues and I can help answer your questions or direct you to one of the panelists, as that would be helpful. Before we sign off, I want to say thank you to Lina, Kurt, and Jessica for joining us today, for sharing your experiences and your expertise on the matter. And thank you to all of the attendees who joined and listened to this conversation. We hope it was informative and helpful context of the GRAIN project and SDG 16. We will welcome all of you to join us again next quarter for a conversation on another sustainable development goal. So thank you again, and we'll sign off from here.